Hey everyone, and welcome to the Mic'd Avengers podcast, where we focus on martial arts and action cinema, but definitely delve into much more. My name is Jason from Martial Arts Theater 3000. I've been a lifelong fan of martial arts movies from Bruce Lee to the Venom Mob, Bruceploitation, and everything in between.
My name's Dragon, aka the Fanatical Dragon on YouTube. I also write the Blu-ray reviews for Eastern Heroes magazine right here in the UK. I'm about 4 decades into this love affair with East Asian cinema, specifically action cinema. Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan and the Shaw brothers got me into Hong Kong films, but unlike my buddy Jason, I've seen a whole bunch of Japanese, Indonesian and South Korean action flicks too. So over the coming episodes, every so often, we're going to force feed him something he has not seen.
And I'm Shaun, also known as Foo for Thought. It all started for me at the tender age of 14, where I discovered Jackie Chan's Drunken Master. From there, I kind of delved into old school Kung Fu, and that has been my passion for 30 plus years now. I also started delving into all realms of Asian cinema, and I'm very happy to say that these days I have a pretty strong passion for kind of dark Korean thrillers. If you like what you hear and you're enjoying the podcast, please give us a like, share and subscribe. And please enjoy this episode of the Mic'd Avengers.
Greetings, dear friends, old and new. Welcome once again to the Mic'd Avengers podcast. I am Johnny, aka the Fanatical Dragon, and delighted as always to be joined by my two dear friends, Jason from Martial Arts Theater 3000. Say hello, Jason.
How's it going?
And Shaun from the Foo for Thought podcast and Foo for Thought YouTube channel. Say hello,
Howdy,
Shaun.
partner.
And we are delighted, absolutely delighted to be staging our first official Mic'd Avengers intervention, in which we take a look at a film that Jason has never, ever seen before, that blows Shaun and my mind, the fact that he has not. And the first one that we're jumping into is 2011's The Raid, directed by Gareth Evans. A phenomenal slice of Indonesian action cinema. IMDb tells us a very brief synopsis. A SWAT team becomes trapped in a tenement run by a ruthless mobster and his army of killers and thugs, which is pretty succinct, pretty to the point. Pretty much what happens. As we get into it, we can speak about how much there was comparisons between this and what ended up being the Dread movie with Carl Urban. They had alarmingly similar plots. And there's shades of Die Hard, and there's shades of a lot more. But I think without me rambling for too much before we get into it together as a group, this was kind of unashamedly a little bit of a tribute to lots and lots of different types of movies. It's not really much of a martial arts movie. I'd say it's more of an action movie, and in some ways more of an action/horror movie, because it's got a lot of horror tropes in it, particularly with the levels of gore. But I am palpably itching to know what Jason thought of this movie. So I'm going to throw it across to you, my brother, and tell me, for your first time watch, how did you get on with The Raid?
All right. I'm going to give you a little bit of like an intro, not to, make you wait too long.
He's going to tease us.
Well, so if this happens to be someone's first time listening to our podcast, letting everyone know, I, of course, love old school Kung Fu, and my cutoff point was pretty much House of Flying Daggers. And after that, it's the steepest cliff, where I could tell you the 3 movies after that being Karate Kid 2010, What
a choice. What an amazing choice.
Ip Man was at 2014, and then we're running out. There was one. I don't know if there might be one more. I can't remember, but
Wasn't
pretty much
the Grandmaster.
No, I've seen clips of that, but I'm the guy that when I would download Haya, I just glazed over all those newer random. They're probably really good. It's just something about it didn't grab me. And but when I put on Wu-Tang Collection app, it's like, bells are going off. I'm like, this is my comfort zone, and these guys are helping me get out of the comfort zone, and which is a good thing. But basically, I just had a bit of a prejudice thinking they would all be shaky camera, Jason Bourne. But Dragon indoctrinated me with the John Wick series, which he sent me. He's so kind like that. And that just was like, wow, that Jason Bourne thing, when, sometimes the James Bond, like Quantum of Solace, which I like, just some of those fight scenes, we could tell a guy's not as good and they compensate. That was like kind of my thing that just pushed me away a bit. And so I was always just resistant and said, I have hundreds of movies I can go back. I've not seen. For all the ones I have seen, was resistant. But when I tell people I've never seen The Raid, their face, it was like, I just was like, oh my gosh. So we decided to do this. This is like a long drum roll for me to tell you
that's
guys.
good.
And I'll just tell you, I was blown away. Absolutely, honestly blown away.
We got one.
I mean, hopefully the whole podcast isn't this monologue right here, but just me, I gotta say, like, first impressions were, the color grade reminds me, you can tell like that color grade of David Fincher in like that Fight Club. I don't know that Magmeta or whatever the word is of it. Everything started looking like that, like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So many movies. Like I actually heard Netflix has like a grade they need you to like match because they want them. Have you noticed all like Ozark? They all have that certain color grade look. You know what I'm talking about? Well, this had that. And I was like, okay, it has that modern thing. And I just loved how it went right into it. I love how it just went straight into everything, which
Can I ask, Jason, did you watch the new 4K release or did you watch an older Blu-ray?
No, you watched the new one.
The one you guys recommended.
Okay, so you got the decent color grade, because the old color grade was a little bit questionable at times. The new one's a great looking color grade. So yeah, I'm glad you watched it this way.
We'll get into it because for a long time it was a difficult movie for them to upscale or to get onto 4K because it was shot on a very early digital format.
Yes,
and there's an enormous amount of visual effects in it that you don't really notice that are visual effects. Like they had absolutely no blank firing weapons on set. Everything is airsoft guns. Yep. So every time you see a muzzle flash, it's CG. There's a whole bunch of shots combined into shots so that they could basically do some unreal falls. Like there's a shot where a guy's back bends over to a horrible degree on the edge of a banister. That's like 3 shots stitched into one. So there was a lot of visual effects going on in a place that had no history of doing visual effects with a micro budget. And so it was a really difficult film. There wasn't really a definitive super high res master for them to work from. So when we saw it originally back in the day, it looked good but not great, like from how the color balance looked.
It was very dingy. It was a dingy looking film. Like it's by nature it's dingy. I mean the actual setting of the film is like a dreary, nasty place. But the actual color grade back in the day was it was perfectly watchable, but it was just a bit dirty, a bit gritty.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. It was kind of like it had a sort of murkiness to it, in a where it's almost like you were looking into a dimly lit environment rather than but you could still see everything that was going on, but it was almost like there was this sort of veneer of grime over the top of it, which isn't present by the time that they got around to doing the Raid 2, which we'll get onto later on. But yeah, sorry, Jason, we broke your flow.
No, but that color grade's the first thing I saw, and then I loved how I was like, okay, wow, we're going into this already. I don't even know if we're at the 2-minute mark. Like the popcorn in the microwave's not even like, it's like this is starting. And I'm the type of guy like we were talking about Blair Witch. I love Eyes Wide Shut. I like movies that make you think and slow down, So I usually don't like the frenetic ones. And that's why I love a lot of the old school. And I don't know what it is. I just really like a lot of movies that people think are slow tend to be like my favorite ones. That's why I love Clockwork Orange and Stanley Kubrick and all that. So, and people get surprised with this. Me and my ex-girlfriend, we went to see Mad Max Fury Road, and we left at the half-hour mark. I walked out.
Excuse me?
I know. But here's my issue with it. Maybe I wasn't in the perfect mood. I know this is like everyone's favorite thing since like the invention of whatever, the Sony Walkman. But my issue with it is that here's my problem. And it's maybe paralleled in how fast they go into it, like the Raid. So when I saw that, I'm like, oh, I've said before, like a guitar solo is only as good as the song in which it's in. Now, and I know this movie's based on, has a big backbone with the other movies, but I guess it was just a fact when I saw, Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, right? Yeah. It just had a thing is like, okay, these two are two good looking Hollywood actors and, they're in here and let's go. Like, we care about them because I don't know. I know I'm maybe slightly missing the point in like a chase film, in that like you don't need it to be whatever, like The Departed or all these twists and turns. It just had such little substance to me that I just couldn't hang with it. And it made the explosions, everything not have weight to them. You know what I mean? So I was a little alarmed seeing this, like, oh, I hope this isn't just like, I don't care about the guys. but they just set it up in the little subtle moments. And I love Tom Hardy. I mean, I love Warrior, the MMA movie with him. I think that's amazing. And so it wasn't just him. It just was something about it. It didn't have the substance. This, here's my initial thoughts, and we could talk about this. My first thoughts are, wow, everyone is so unassuming. Even the hero has a boyish look to him. This isn't your standard hero look. Then when you see, and then when you see, and I love with his pregnant wife, that gives you so much to it at the beginning. And that,
it's great. It's a very, very clever addition to the film that they don't have to give you that pregnant wife at the beginning, but it sets up such a
stake.
Stake, exactly. When the action kicks in, you're like, oh, remember, he's got that pregnant wife at home.
And it anchors it. And then when
it's saw too, weirdly, just before we get too far away from the beginning, because one of the kind of the things that was really surprising in the way that it's just put in there, but it's put in there not in a way to be political or to make a statement. It's just put in there purely to give you a little bit of a sense of who that character is, where we realize that he's Muslim. We see him praying and we see him kind of going through his morning cycle. So he may be the most kick-ass Muslim action hero we've ever seen in any movie ever in the history of time. But it's not dwelled on. It's not like made a point. It's literally just a little choice that kind of gives you, without really taking too long to do it, a sense of the fact that he has a value system, and he's kind of basically he's pretty righteous. He's the kind of good guy in amongst a not necessarily pack of good people on both sides, right? Because some of the cops are pretty questionable as well. Some of his kind of members of his team, and then obviously our main villain is pretty despicable in a gloriously understated way, and his henchmen are varying degrees of awesomeness. So carry on, Jason.
Well, and going off of that, it's like if you have silent films, sometimes just the look on people's faces is enough to everyone might assign different powers to this person, but it's enough to give like an enriched, deep thing just based off expressions. I was getting that off everyone. The gray-haired fella, I actually have the cast here, but the gray-haired guy, the Muslim hero you just mentioned, who I thought was amazing. I felt like he was this is what I loved about the movie too. It had that Shang-Chi element where you felt like anyone could die at any moment, which happened a lot, and they were dropping like flies. I felt like, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if this hero dies, and then the gentleman you just mentioned takes the lead. That could easily have happened, because I thought he had the screen presence. I thought he had the charisma and the fighting skills.
Which guy?
Well, I'm sorry.
The head of the team?
Well, Joe Taslim, Jaka. That's the guy who did the Muslim prayer, right? At the beginning? Okay.
No, it was Eco. Eco was who did.
It's kind of Eco who has a pregnant wife, and Eco who you see praying. You don't meet Joe until you get into the van. Joe Taslim's like the. When he was bowing at the beginning.
Coincidentally, Joe Taslim was the one who went on to become the biggest star.
Yeah, in many ways.
Ultimately, he's in Mortal Kombat, and he's featuring in these films. So,
and that's what I could see. I could see that they had like similar protagonist roles. Obviously, Eco is the main guy, but if he had got killed, I could see Joe or Jaka, taking the lead. And that element of it, it just makes it so good. And that's what makes me think about American films. And this is, I think, what you guys are kind of teaching me away. And maybe it's more of an Asian thing with Korea. And like we've said, Shang-Chi, it's just like I've often said, Sylvester Stallone's never going to die in the movie, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's never going to die in the movie. But if they would just let that happen once, wouldn't that, it's like that element, it just makes everything so much more grounded, because you literally don't know if he's going to escape the scene. So as it went into it, just from the looks on their faces and the little dialogue, I cared about everyone. And that fighting, wow. I mean, this is like on a level, and I do martial arts and stuff, and like I was looking for, maybe I wanted a little more jujitsu, but Joe gave me that judo aspect of it, which I wanted to see, and I
national champion.
Yeah.
He was a national champion.
Kind of summing up, I guess, my first round of the opinions. I want to hear like how you guys first saw it and like in your guys' backstory on it. But the fighting, I mean, it takes it to such a high level. It's like, okay, this is what everyone's been telling me I need to see in the Raid. I could see it just has that it factor. The camera works perfect. There's maybe a couple moments, if you're really nitpicky, where like when some of the like lesser guys come out of a room, and you can maybe see them kind of doing like a little bit of a choreography feel. But the only reason that irks you is because the other stuff feels so real and the realism is so high. it's like, well, I've been watching these like Bruceploitation movies where the guys are really showing some choreography in the background. But it's when it gets to that level, it actually makes you go, oh, okay, it feels so real that when it takes you out for a moment, it's a little more noticeable, when it feels a little more like choreographer saw, or you can see the choreography of just maybe a guy kind of like doing like a movement versus like a pattern versus like blocking the kick like naturally. But it normally feels like, I mean, I just so blown away. And this is what I also love. And I'm sure we'll talk about this. The element of like Die Hard and Castaway, these movies when you're in one location. I don't know if the word's cozy or something, but if you're watching like a James Bond film, it's just so unpredictable. But when you do a thing where you're in one location, that becomes like another character, or that is, and it's like, I could see the shades of Die Hard. I always love Die Hard, how you just know they're in this one spot, and the parameters. And I don't know why it doesn't feel claustrophobic. Like, you remember that old movie called The Cube or something, or Cube? That kind of made me feel, they wanted you to feel like, oh crap, we're in this, like, or even Saw. It's just like, sometimes when you go, okay, we're stuck here, and it doesn't always feel good. This is like, oh, we're stuck here, and I love it. It makes it just that much better.
I think they definitely kind of used that that same principle from a production standpoint, where they were very easy for them to redress. But I think they just used chalk lettering to make the marks showing what number of floor you were on.
So for the next day or something.
Kind of, not so much that, but so they could basically kind of still use the same set and then just redress the number on it, so you thought you're on a different floor. But I think setting in this tower block meant they didn't build the whole tower block. They just built like the corridor and the bits they had to kind of use, and then that could be used because the corridors would be the same whichever level you were on. So although it's one location, it's kind of, there's this, that there's different levels. So it works so much like a computer game in a way, where it's like an ascent with a various boss fight at different stages. And I know that the director's a massive computer game fan, so I think lots of people compared it to a computer game at the time that it came out, and I think he took that as like glorious praise, where a lot of people would be like, oh shit, okay. A lot of people who maybe aren't into computer games would view that as negative criticism, but he saw it as very much as a big pro. Because I think that's totally what they were kind of going for. So it does have that kind of like one location charm, but without ever getting repetitive or claustrophobic, in a way that Cube definitely was designed to. Cube's a great movie. That first Cube movie is great, but it does give you that creeping anxiety, even though they were doing that same idea of using the same set and then lighting it differently in Cube to make it look like they'd moved into a different space, right? They only really had one room set, and they just kept reusing it and putting in different traps and stuff. So I never got the sense that, although it was filmed in pretty much a lot of single-built sets, it never felt like it. It completely believably felt like they were transcending through this multi-story building.
Yeah, it's a real testament to Gareth Evans's direction that he can make it feel like an apartment block, they're trapped in a multiple floor apartment block, and the fact that this. The Raid is often considered the upper echelon of action films, right? It's probably the most genre-defining film of the last however long, 20 years maybe. And it's crazy. This film was made for $1.1 million. So, wow. I mean, that blows my mind. And yes, okay, there were various components that fit together perfectly. Yes, it's an Indonesian film, so, face it, Iko wasn't charging that much to star in this film. He probably didn't get paid a huge amount, but the fact that they had $1.1 million and they can make an action film of this caliber, it still blows my mind. And if you watch the special features on the Blu-ray, the newly released 4K, the behind the scenes stuff is unbelievable. Like Dragon mentioned earlier, the fact that they had such limited resources to use, and they just made it this masterpiece. I think it's a testament to everyone involved, to be honest. And I can't remember who it was, but I think it was an interviewer from a magazine or something like that. I might be getting this story a little bit wrong, but they contacted Joe Taslim, and they were talking about his fight. Spoiler alert: the fight against Mad Dog, where he ends up, deceased.
Mhm.
And they said, can you tell me a bit about that fight? You can tell me like what happened. How did that fight go about? And Joe tells him, just go, it hurt. It hurt a lot. And that's, they put themselves through hell to make these amazing fight sequences. I don't know. I think, personally, I think more people need to do this. More people need to be given smaller budgets and just go balls to the wall. And I know it's difficult in some aspects because you have to find the right people to do that. But with the way action is right now, I think you can find those people.
I think it's happening. I think these movies, although Gareth Evans is kind of no longer based in Indonesia, he basically kind of set up in much of the same way, and I'm going to put on my film geek hat and say in much the same way as when the Sand Pebbles went over to Hong Kong and then left. Like the Sand Pebbles made such an incredible impact on Hong Kong cinema because they brought over kind of color cameras and they trained up so many people there in Hong Kong. So it was basically kind of like that filtered into so many of the Shaw Brothers movies and the movies that we all adore. A lot of that came from basically some guys who end up being first ADs and camera assistants, all working on the Sand Pebbles, which is this massive, huge American production. And then basically learning a lot of those techniques of the first dolly tracks and stuff that were getting used in Kung Fu cinema was all coming off the back of that era, right? And the same thing kind of happened with The Raid, where so many stuntmen were pulled into work on this movie who then went on to do other stuff. Like Timo and most of Timo's team were pretty closely connected to this and kind of cut their teeth working on this as kind of like basically helping out on set. And particularly, I think Timo's stunt coordinator was one of the guys doing stunts on The Raid. And so a lot of the kind of the infrastructure for Indonesian action cinema, which is at this point still going incredibly strong. We just had The Shadow Strays last year, which was so phenomenal. And all of that, I think, is kind of like the evolution of what we saw coming out of The Raid and The Raid 2. I would have loved if we got a third movie in the franchise, but I kind of like that there's just two. And I like that kind of Gareth Evans has gone on to do other things. He kind of just dropped this bomb of like a fusion of like a sensibility that loves horror movies and that loves John Carpenter movies. And he pulled together all these disparate elements from American cinema and from Hong Kong cinema that he absolutely adored and kind of put them all into this. And I think to give those people that don't know a little bit of backstory, he found Eco on their previous movie called Moranto, which was very much slower paced and much more of a, in a way, traditional martial arts movie that was kind of really highlighting Pencat Silat, which is the style that particularly Mad Dog and Eco are doing in The Raid as well. But The Raid much more story driven, and so they don't really start doing martial arts until all the bullets have been expended. Like he constantly forces it through situations. But a lot of you see a lot of an influence of Jackie Chan's choreography. And a huge amount of influence from Hong Kong and American cinema and horror cinema, and particularly like some of the John Carpenter stuff as well. I think I see shades of Escape from New York and all that sort of stuff in this. But when he left, Indonesian cinema has continued, and in a way it's continued very much in the vein of this. And we'll get there in time, but you'll get to see Joe Taslim, and we'll speak about Joe Taslim again, because we will absolutely be doing The Night Comes for Us, which I think ups the ante in so many ways.
Okay, because that's like my tail end of me saying it's exciting to say this is amazing and it blew my mind and I'm so happy about that. But on the same token, it felt to me, I don't know, it felt like I was worried maybe you guys gave me like the cream of the crop and it might be like kind of down, but it seems like there's a lot of heavy hitters.
We gave you ground zero. We gave you the first floor of The Raid, and you've got to get all the way
up.
Different movie on every level.
I think it's interesting that The Raid is the one I would call the special one, because that's the one that landed and really influenced modern action cinema. And I think many films have kind of up the ante a little bit, but in various different ways. The Night Comes for Us, is it overall a better film than The Raid? I think that's entirely subjective. Some people will say it is, some people will say it isn't. But is it far more violent than The Raid? Yes, by a mile. It is.
Wait, really?
Oh, The Night Comes for Us is like, the word for that I would use is brutal. It's a mean-spirited film in a way.
All of Timo's action is, but he would say it's more coming from a place of realism. So he won't shy away from showing blood. And why stab somebody once when you can stab them 80 times?
Yes, and I love it, because in my opinion as well, the best thing that Timo does, he does very extreme violence, and it never feels cartoony.
Or
It
not
never
or
feels
gratuitous.
like very, oh, this is goofy to them. You know, you watch something like, I don't know if either of you have seen the new horror franchise that's making waves everywhere, Terrifier.
No, not yet.
So the Terrifier films have like basically set the horror world on fire because they are the most brutal slasher films of recent memory. And I mean, they don't joke around. They are really, really harsh and brutal. But it's cartoony. The slasher villain in it is a clown, and he's a clown that doesn't speak. He mimes a lot, so it's kind of silly and kind of goofy. But Timo stuff never goes that way. It is just harsh, brutal violence, and I can't get enough of it, to be honest.
Well, you know what this reminded me of? When Halloween 2018 came out, you know, like I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
The sequel, I don't remember. The second one and the third one mixed to me, but the sequel I did not really like, and I thought the third was really bad. And I thought the third, this is just my take on it, just the violence. They were trying to shock so much that it just kind of just was a kill for this. The kills took the main thing, but it had such little substance, where the Halloween 2018 had the substance and the kills got you for it, you know?
Yeah.
But when that third one, I had some feelings in this, like when that guy's crawling in that hallway scene, he stabs the guy in the heart.
Yeah.
For some reason, my brain went to that Halloween 3, but in a good way on this, because you cared of the people so much.
Yeah.
But so when you're saying that The Night Comes for Us makes this pale, I'm like, wow, because I thought Halloween, and I'm talking about something on a level where it's not just pure gore, and it's not like, you know, just like spaghetti stuff coming out or something, you know, just a slight little bit of realism. But or actually a lot of realism. I felt like those stabs and stuff in this, it was a little exaggerated, but those stabs in the heart seemed like very realistic.
The practical effects in it are amazing as well.
Yeah, they're fantastic. They really are.
And I guess what I was going to say is that, well, I found this to be, it was very violent. I felt the horror element, and the violence though wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't too like,
gratuitous.
I mean, but I'll say, like, it was funny if you listen to the commentary. What's the director's name again?
Gareth Evans.
Gareth, who's so likable. That guy's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I felt his commentary.
Fellow Welshman.
Yes,
Welshman.
He had to have had an editor on that. You can't hear him breathe once. It's just the most steady, like perfect thing of facts. It ends. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. And I didn't ramble. And I'm used to like some of those older kung fu. You can hear them hit the mic and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and like this was like so pro. I mean, I was very impressed. But what I wanted to say is that he kept saying, "Oh, this is my mother's favorite CD," and that like whatever. It was just so violent. You know, he was joking. Another thing that he said though that I was a little surprised by. I will say that I felt, unlike some Arnold Schwarzenegger action movies, and unlike, let me think, Die Hard, for instance, I felt there was no humor in this. I did not catch any, because he kept referring to black. He kept saying black comedy, and he kept black comedy moments. And he said, like, when the guy brings like a butter knife or get the bullet out, like the audience laughs. I think I was so like enthralled and so kind of like, what the hell's going on? I didn't even notice the butter knife really, like meaning like, and then I guess there's a moment where, there's some dialogue. He actually said there's some different translations. Like he said, when that guy comes in with the machete and sees the wall and he starts talking, he said that the audience in Indonesia was cracking up the way he was talking, but the Americans and in England and stuff didn't laugh at all. They were still scared. I felt like I was in that edge of my seat thing. Yeah, I didn't catch, like, you know, Arnold does the one-liners and Die Hard, like there's tons of one-liners and little funny moments, and it works. I felt like this, to me, felt bleak and just dark and just
there's no cheese. That's the thing. It's missing. Oh, I don't mean it's missing like it's a bad thing. It just doesn't have action cheese, and I think that in itself is refreshing. Yeah. Because, you know, we had so much action where there's this, like you said, the one-line elements, and to be honest, the best of the best action films, if you think of those from the 80s and 90s, they're all cheesy. In a good way, most of them. You know, Van Damme,
Predator.
Exactly.
Stick around. Yeah.
And The Raid is just unfathomably serious, but in a very, very good way. I'll tell a brief story. So the first time I watched The Raid, I saw it in the theater. I was pretty lucky. A local theater. It wasn't even that local. I had to travel on a train to get there. and I went to this theater, and it was
Shaun, were you still in the UK at this point?
no, I was actually in the US. This was in Chicago.
Okay.
And I headed to this theater, and I sat down, and every single member of the audience sat on the same row. And it was a small audience. The rest of the theater was empty, and yet we all sat on the same row, which I thought was really strange. I will admit, I was not one of those that saw people on the row and then sat down. I was one of the first there and sat down, and people just followed me and sat on the same row. And I'm so thankful that we did, because during the final fight of this film, the 2 versus 1, there was a girl to the right of me, and she was loudly, not just laughing, guffawing. Like, she was absolutely in stitches, and it was annoying me.
Yeah.
And I turned to her, and I realized she wasn't laughing at the film. She was in absolute bliss. She was so excited by the action. She turned to me, and she literally said the words, "I can't help it." And she was just enjoying the film so much. And I've never seen someone that happy to be watching a film before. And it was a really nice moment, because
That's great.
I'm not trying to, be sexist here, but, women that I've come across in my life, they haven't necessarily leaned heavily towards the martial arts films or even action films in that general. But to see this girl just sat there by herself, she wasn't there with anyone else, just having the grandest time of her life. It was infectious. I started giggling to myself. It was infectious. I was just like, yeah, whatever we're seeing on screen right now is possibly one of the best action moments we've seen in, like I said, 20 years. And it was really special. And I think I left that theater, and then on the same day, I went back and watched it again. And then I think I watched it one more time. I think I saw it 3 times in the theater.
Wow.
But I
did that with Super Cop. I saw it, I think, 4 times in the theater.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I didn't get the chance. I don't think I did. I saw the second one, the second raid in the theater as well. Which, by the way, Jason, you'll be surprised by the second film.
Please no spoilers, because when we get to the end, I want us to kind of, actually, no, I'm the only one that can try to guess on the end, because there's a lot of untied things open, for me.
I won't spoil any aspect of the film other than it's, instead of a tight little action film, it's a sprawling crime epic. It's so much bigger.
I think you know what? I think that makes sense, because you would need to do that. If you just do it in another tower,
exactly.
that wouldn't work. That wouldn't.
Yeah,
really work.
he's I think
it's not Die Hard 2 in an airport.
No. Exactly.
Well, see, even Die Hard, they knew not to go back to the building again. You know what I mean?
Kind of, but they still try. I think they with Die Hard, they definitely tried to make lightning strike twice. Weirdly, I think Die Hard 3 is almost a more effective sequel, because it's a very different type of movie, because it was a non-Die Hard script that they turned into Die Hard 3.
I
agree. A script called Simon Says, and
yeah.
it became more of a buddy cop movie in a way. It's a lot more of those tropes. But the Raid 2 is it's very hard for me to decide on which one I favor, and I usually end up falling down the Raid, because you couldn't get the Raid 2 without the Raid.
Yeah.
But the Raid 2, which original title was Bear and Die, was actually conceived of before he made the Raid, and he tried to get funding for what we now think of as the Raid 2. Couldn't get that amount of money, and so ended up making a smaller scale production called the Raid, which he basically, and it's not called the Raid in Indonesia, it's called Shaun, can you remember?
I cannot.
Not important.
Yeah, I
can't. He got less money. They made basically what we now think of as the Raid, and then off the back of that, he kind of rejigged his script for Bear and Die, which then became the Raid 2. So he kind of changed elements in it to make it sort of fit, but it's a kind of, it is a sequel and it's not, where it's really only Iko who carries over. Some of the actors from the Raid 1 are in the Raid 2, but they're not playing the same characters. He's just basically expanding the world.
It's very unique that he did that. He put the same actors in, but different characters.
Yeah. As an aside, I want to say, I think the Raid is an amazing title. I think that is just awesome. I do not like the Raid Redemption. I know there was a reason.
It's awful.
It sounds like a PS2 game or something. I noticed you guys never call it that, but I know they had to do it for, I guess there was some rights, he couldn't get the rights.
No, it's a weird one. I mean, it's a testament to how phenomenal he is, and I think that kind of quite a few people in the industry recognized that very early on. So unbelievably, he sold the international rights to this movie when he was still making the movie. So he sold the rights to Sony when he was still on set, based on the initial footage that they had from production up to that point. He was the editor as well, so he was editing as he went. And Sony got involved, and it was Sony that decided they wanted to have this extra tag on with the name, and also Sony that decided that they wanted to have a script done by Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park. So there's two score, two very different scores to the movie. I prefer the Indonesian score. I think it's more atmospheric.
Can I just chime in for 1 second?
Please do.
I listened to it with the Indonesian score this time around.
Yeah.
It's so much better.
Yeah.
By a long shot. It feels like a horror movie at times. Like, it's creepy and dark. Yeah, I love it. Sorry to
No, I think can we pause to talk about that? Like, can we get our takes on the score real quick?
Yeah.
I actually am opposite you guys. I thought, and it's weird, when I first heard Linkin Park, that felt very 2011 to me. I was like, oh, the guy from Linkin Park, is this going to be like, but I guess because I watched that and just the driving nature of it. Now it's pretty busy. He's in a lot of the scenes. That music's in like most of the scenes, but it became, like I say, another character, and it was just driving. So when I went to watch, then I watched it with a commentary, and then I went to watch it with the original score. I thought maybe I hit something where there's an option with the score to not be there. I was surprised how little at the beginning, like with the pregnancy, his wife's pregnant, that scene, and a lot of the opening dialogue, and when they arrive, whenever Mike Shindo is talking about how when they arrive, he like did that driving thing. There's like no music there. I was surprised. And I don't know, some of it when it started to me, it just sounded I don't know, I want to say amateurish. It just, I think if I had watched that first, maybe I could have been then impressed by the Linkin Park.
I saw the Linkin Park score first too.
Okay. But I will say at the very end, whenever I keep Yuda, Iko, is that how you say his name? The main guy, when he's walking towards the camera, the song in the Indonesian version is really cool. It sounds like a live band. Is that them, or is that like a band, like a song? The song that takes into the credits on the Indonesian version, the original.
I don't remember.
I'm not too sure, actually. I don't know if that's something they've curated or something that the guys who did the score also.
Oh, because it has vocals come in when it says the raid. But man, when I saw that, I was like, that's great. But some of it just sounded a little amateurish, and it sounded to me like in the drug scene, in the drug what did you want to call it? With the making all the drug, the factory. What was that? Oh, no, I thought it was just strange. And then in the hallway, I think I was just, as they say, comparison is the death of joy. But like me, like I was like, I love the music that he did in that hallway scene. Yeah. And that fate with the stabbing, all that. But the guy in Indonesia, I heard like a little bit of Western flair or something. I don't know. It was cool. It just, I guess to me, part of it, the on your seat of it, the driving, them going up, works with that constant like Shindoa thing. But there was a lot of stops in the Indonesia where it was silent again, and then it like
it's definitely more like a soundscape than a traditional score. It's kind of it's a lot more atmosphere than it is sort of traditional score work. And I like that they have these sort of two different versions. It's kind of nice that they kind of both exist. Yeah. And
do you guys dig on the other one though? Do you dig on the Shindoa?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. It was the first one that I saw, and I think I should actually jump in at this point and say how I first experienced it. I think I saw it. I was trying to remember back, and I can't remember if it was in one of the film festivals in Edinburgh when Edinburgh still had a kick-ass film festival. Sadly, we kind of don't really anymore. But it was either in a film festival screening. I think it probably must have been, because that was really the only way that we would get lots of films from other parts of the world all condensed in one. So I'm pretty sure it was one of the film festivals that I saw it in Edinburgh, but definitely saw the first one at the cinema and then the second one at the cinema. And I was absolutely blown away by it. I think it was a pretty packed house when I went to see it. And I'm going to throw a quick shout out to our friend Cynthia, who runs the Dragon Seeks Path channel. She does a great video about her introduction to Indonesian cinema and speaks about how she did like a class on action cinema at her university, and the very first day, the very first movie he showed the class was The Raid, and half the class left.
Really?
And she was like there transfixed, and she said that kind of began this love affair with Indonesian action cinema. And it's kind of go and check out her video on her channel, because it's great hearing her enthusiastically speak about her first exposure to it. But it is one of these movies that really just kind of grabs you and doesn't really let you go if you connect with it and if you kind of go with it. I love both versions of the score and didn't get a chance to hear the Indonesian version until the new 4K.
Oh, okay.
That was the first time I'd ever heard the Indonesian score, and I really dug it. Maybe because it's a movie that I've seen probably 20, 25 times, I think, over the years, going back to the cinema and then having it on DVD and then having it on Blu-ray multiple times.
It's a very easy go-to film.
Completely.
It's very easy to say, oh, what do I fancy watching today? You know, it's a lazy Sunday afternoon. I've got nothing to do. I just want a good film that I've maybe seen before that I'm just going to enjoy. Just throw in The Raid. It's a good time.
I think I've seen part 2 more.
Oh, really? I haven't. I think I've only seen part 2 about twice, maybe 3 times. So really not as. I think I've seen The Night Comes For Us more than I've seen The Raid 2. But that, I will admit, my wife absolutely loves The Night Comes For Us. She's a bigger fan of that than The Raid and The Raid 2.
It's another masterpiece level. I mean, all these movies that we're talking about, really, there's a kind of a pack of Indonesian cinema that I would describe every single one as a masterpiece. And I know masterpiece gets bandied about quite a lot, but it's never more true in Indonesian action. There's something about the tone that The Raid kicked things off with, where it was so grounded. There's shades of humor, but like you say, there's no cheese, and that's continued to follow through. It's kind of almost like if you could call them tropes, that has become the tropes of Indonesian action cinema. They are largely devoid of cheese. They're generally kind of fairly grounded. There is martial arts in them, but it never feels like you're watching a choreographed display in as much as you're kind of watching people flat out fighting for their lives.
Absolutely.
There's a sort of a raw intensity to them.
It's a desperation, I think. That's a good word, I think.
Yeah, and a hunger, I think, from the filmmakers too, to really do an awful lot with a little.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's so many unbelievable tricks in that first movie that I didn't really pick up on until watching it multiple times. And Jason, I'm glad that you've already had a chance to kind of go through it. 3 times have you gone through?
3 times. Well, that's what I was going to say. The rewatchability. I don't know what it is. There's certain movies that not even kung fu movies. Rounders with Matt Damon. You know, where they're betting. I don't know why I could watch that movie like every day. I don't even, it's hard to pinpoint why. It's just something about, and actually I don't know exactly about The Raid. Maybe it's because you can turn your mind off on The Raid, and it's like, I was surprised that when there was still an hour and how much had already transpired, you know, like I was just like, wow, there's another hour, like, you know, and it doesn't, it's like a mixture of, it's really meaty. There's so much to it, but it definitely doesn't feel long at an hour and 40.
Yeah.
But you know, and before I forget, I wanted to ask you guys, I don't know if it's an Indonesian thing or like, so you talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is like my template for seeing action movies in the theater. And I'm sure a lot of ours are first starting points, you know, Predator, Van Damme, all that stuff. I guess it's just, I mean, I don't know, in the animal kingdom, the biggest guy, the biggest, you know, like the hugest shark. This movie kind of bucks that. And when I first saw the 3 villains, like obviously in action movies, they'll have the villain be kind of like smaller and he has henchmen and stuff, right? But everyone's very unassuming. And a lot of the guys are wearing khakis and almost like these sweaters, like they're going to a computer lab or something, you know what I mean? And like, I said, there's this one shot where you see Iko's brother and you see the main guy and I guess just another henchman. And they just look like you would not think these guys could kick ass, really. They do not look badass to me. You know, it looks very unassuming. Now, he did say that was by nature with the main guy. He wanted him to be like kind of like casual and, you know, and I don't know. Outside, and even Iko at first, he said this when he first saw him he went to that Salat class, and he said he just seemed like a guy you wouldn't think, but he opened up. And they actually said that back in the day about Bruce Lee. They said when he would do like kind of like an informal audition where he'd meet a producer, he'd be in a suit, and they'd be like, "Wow, this guy looks really slender and small." And then he would take off his suit and kind of do his lats thing, and he just opened up like I don't know, Cobra or something, you know. And everyone in this movie did that, and they like, especially Mad Dog. I mean, he seemed, and also he reminds me of that famous guy. I can't remember his name from Big Trouble in Little China. He gives me that guy's vibe.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, he totally reminds me.
Al Jong.
Al Jong, is it? Yeah.
Total vibes of him. But Mad Dog, I was like, okay, this is Mad Dog, and like, but he opened up, and I have to say it's better for it, because when Van Damme goes up against some huge steroided out guy, you get the payoff from just seeing the guy, you know what I mean? Like this opens up like an accordion, and this guy has all these layers. But I will say though, if you just saw them all standing there, you wouldn't say, "Oh, this is like martial arts practitioners. You know what I
No.
mean? Because even Gordon Liu, with all his like charm and looks, when he's kind of shredded, he's kind of like ripped when he gets his shirt off. Even Chen, all those guys, you could tell Shaw Brothers Studio wanted to have a little bit of like a look to them. These guys, like, I don't know, it just seemed like they didn't care. It was about the pure martial arts. And maybe it's a fact they're all drug dealers and stuff, and it's like slimy. And
I think Iko is probably one of the bulkier ones of that crew.
Okay.
The guy who's playing Mad Dog, you would have picked up from the commentary that he was kind of choreography. He was doing the choreography as well. Like, so it was him and Iko doing all the choreography for the whole movie. And really, he was a kind of last minute addition to the cast, where they were struggling to find somebody to play the kind of like one of the henchmen's main fighting villains. And it's almost not as an afterthought, but I think it was one of the producers that suggested that you should let Ryan try out for it from an acting point of view and see how he does. And really, it's his first kind of big, I think he is in Marantau, but
he is in Marantau. He's in the elevator fight.
Yeah. This is his first kind of long sustained actual character performance, where he was given an actual kind of character with nuance to try and do, and he knocks it out of the park. And I think he does even better in the Raid 2. That's not a spoiler, but he plays a very different part.
He does.
And he ends up being, in as much as he's captivating in the Raid from a physical presence point of view, even though he's quite diminutive in size, he's unbelievably like fast and crazy when he's going up against that sort of 2-against-1 fight at the end. Is unreal. But his performance in the Raid 2 really much more empathetic, so you end up, your heart breaks for what he does in the Raid 2. He's like,
so your point is that, like what Shaun said, they play different characters because he died in the Raid 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But he is, I think, he definitely sort of subverts expectations. But I think he is, because he's still in movies now, and he's got a small cameo at the end of The Shadow Strays, and he is just that size. Like, he's not a big dude. Right?
No,
he's unbelievably skilled.
They set him up perfectly in the Raid. Early on, one of the one of the lines in the film is they refer to Mad Dog as a maniac of feet and fists. And you look at him, you're like, what's this dude going to really pull off, Yeah. And then when he breaks it out, you're like, oh shit, he's an absolute beast. And weirdly, I think he's even gone on to do bigger and better things than Iko. He was in Boy Kills World.
Yeah. But little parts. I think we're maybe selling Iko slightly short, because Iko has done quite a lot of stuff in Hollywood.
Yes, he has.
I think he's, but to the point where I'm projecting, but I think he's got immensely frustrated with his Hollywood experiences. So he's now started his own film company. They've announced their first 2 movies.
3?
Yes, 3. And I think with the support of Kenji Tanigaki and a whole bunch of other industry people, and I suspect we might see him and Joe Taslim coming back together again at some point, maybe. So I think he's got his own, in the Jackie Chan style way, there's an Iko action team, and so he's continued kind of building up a sort of school of stuntmen, having them work on other productions, and is often kind of doing the choreography on movies. Tragically, he and Yayan both got wasted immensely by Disney, and they put him in a Star Wars movie, doing no action.
Which one? Which
Force Awakens? They're in the Force Awakens.
Okay, I actually like that one. Yeah,
it's of the modern Disney movies. The Force Awakens is far from the worst. I personally,
that next one was horrible, and I didn't even watch the third.
It's a scatter show. That's a whole different podcast of depression, going down that rabbit hole.
It's a crime.
And he did Catch 22 with Mark Wahlberg.
Mile 22.
I think maybe the most successful one is a slightly lower budget, and is Triple Threat.
Triple Threat, that was kind of billed as almost like a direct-to-video Expendables in a way.
Kind of,
I think,
like him, Tony Jaa, Tiger Chen, who worked behind the scenes on the Matrix movies and made Man of Tai Chi, Scott Adkins, Michael Jai White's
in there.
It's just a good fun. Is that Jesse Ventura? No, not Jesse Ventura.
No, it is. Yes. No, yeah. Jesse Johnson.
Yes,
I'm thinking
Jesse Ventura is from Predator.
70. He's like 72 now.
I agree with you. So.
Jesse Johnson. And I think one of my favorite Jesse Johnson movies, and a lot of his films do go sort of straight to streaming or straight to video, but Triple Threats is pretty good. So Iko has done bits and pieces, is my point, but he's definitely not.
It's very exciting. Just to chime in a second. Iko is currently working with, has currently worked, or recently worked, I should say, with the director that the I guess the action community or martial arts community is absolutely a buzz around at the moment. Have you heard of Chi Peng Fei? Okay, so he has directed and choreographed a bunch of straight-to-streaming movies in China. So he's done that recent Eye for an Eye, the Blind Samurai film.
Right, yeah, I just didn't make the connection.
He did Fight Against Evil and Fight Against Evil 2. And he recently did the one that everyone talked about last year, but few people actually saw because it's pretty hard to find, which is Blade of Fury. And he is... Honestly, he's setting the martial arts world on fire at the moment. He's incredible. And Eco has just filmed with him. And I believe it's from what I've gathered, it's like a die-hard film set on a plane or something. I know it's very plane-centric, but people are very excited, including myself. I'm very excited because to see those two teaming up, I just love the idea of what they might do. Yeah, it's got a recipe for success all over it.
And he did work with Timo. He made Headshot with Timo.
He did. I completely forgot about Headshot. Oh my god, yeah. And he's in The Night Comes For Us. If you didn't know, Jason, Eco's in.
Well, I was thinking in a year's time I'll be able to hang with these
you'll get there. We're gonna do them all.
We'll get you there. We'll hold your hand. We'll get you.
I've noticed of everyone in the community. This is just I might have missed it, but Shaun and Dragon. What's the name of the Michelle Yeoh movie that won like all those awards?
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, I haven't noticed you two guys rave about that one as much. I know everyone was, but was your minds not blown on that one when you watched?
It's all right. It's a good science fiction kind of like sci-fi comedy multiverse movie, and it's great seeing the wee kid from the Goonies getting a second wind and him winning his Oscar for it.
Like
awesome.
Andrew, when he had to come into our Facebook chat, leaving the theater, he's like, guys, oh my god, like people online. I mean, it was like the second coming. So I thought this was going to be right down the line, but it seems like The Night Come For Us and what is it, Shadows? Or what's that other one you love? Baby Assassins 3, Shaun?
Yeah, Baby Assassins 3 was the one.
It seems like there's a lot more modern ones you rate higher than that.
I just don't. I mean,
it's not an action film.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
At the end of the day, it's not an action film. It's a multi-dimensional sci-fi film.
Oh, I thought it was actually packed because it has that. What's the name of that team on Instagram that like muscular heavy guy? Yeah, I mean that guy.
Someone might be interviewing them this month for his YouTube channel. I can't tell you who. Wink, wink. But someone might be.
Cool. Wow. That's a good get.
I can't believe how that guy can do those flips. He's doing
those dudes are unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
I mean, but for his size, it's like seeing like I don't know, like a Sammo Hung doing like Guak Choi moves or something. You know?
Brian, right? The bald-headed guy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Brian Lee. Yeah.
So powerful too. Like you know what I mean? Like what I mean is like it's not like some light like his moves. He lands and does like a Dragon Ball Z thing at the end of every like landing. You know?
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's dope that they got the chance to do the choreography for it, and I think the best bit about that Shang-Chi movie was Andy Lee. Kind of, he was criminally underused in that, and I wouldn't go as far as to say they were underused in Everything Everywhere All at Once because it's not that sort of movie. It's as much about the costume design as it is about the action choreography of that movie, and that's not selling either one short because the costume design in that movie is fucking incredible.
Yes,
like it's a great film, right? But I don't really think of it as being an action film. It's much more. That's what it is. It is really think of it as sci-fi.
Did you enjoy that one, though, Shaun? Shaun too.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah, I really, really like it. I like it for what it is. It's quirky, and I know it's going to be one of those films that at the time was absolutely glorious and everyone loved, and over time people will look back at it and go, it's not that good. I think it's one of those films. I don't think it will maintain the love that we all had for it when it came out, but keep in mind I've only seen it once so far. It's actually due for a rewatch by me, so we'll see if I enjoy it. But yeah, as an action film, it has great action beats, but just not enough of them. I prefer the Wong Kar-wai kind of homage in it, in regards to like Hong Kong cinema than the action.
Yeah.
Speaking of Mad Dog, before I forget, I wouldn't say this is a hot take, and I might try to pull you guys into this. Do you feel Mad Dog's scenes? Do you feel he steals the show a bit? His two, I mean,
I do.
The other guys are in it, but there's something about his two scenes that just like he's like the MVP. I think in a way.
He's the Terminator. He can't die in this film. he just keeps coming. Like the fact that in fact, I will say this. I talked about Indonesian cinema not being cartoony. The Raid is almost cartoony with the amount they have to do to kill Mad Dog.
Oh, I know.
It's so over the top, but it's glorious. And I think he steals the show to a degree. But I think Eco is kind of the secret powerhouse to this film. Even though he's kind of a quiet character and, you don't expect much from him, if you really focus on him and how much of a fantastic martial artist he is and solid actor, then it's really quite impressive.
It is kind of his breakout movie, much more so than Morantau. I think this kind of the tone of it's much better. Morantau is almost like a kind of staging version and there's a reason why we jumped into the Raid first and didn't suggest to go back and watch Morantau first, because I think I don't feel your reaction would have been the same as I don't think it would have hit you in the same way that the Raid has. Jason. This was the best ground zero to start you in on, right? And I think I'm not going to say that that it's going to be like a night and day kind of transition from here onwards, where I don't think it's going to. I think there's going to be films that you'll enjoy for different reasons or in different ways, but they're all of kind of similar quality or slightly better in terms of they've had slightly higher budgets, or we're just slightly further on in time and production techniques are better and camera technology is better. And so I think it's a really kind of great sort of first course for Indonesian cinema. It's a wonderful introduction, but also a satiating meal at the same time, because it's such a well-rounded, complete, perfectly realized little movie.
He mentioned in that commentary, he mentions that movie a lot, and he talked about how they went straight into this movie, like wanted the action to hit so early, because he seemed to be saying he felt like the other one took a little bit too long to get to the action.
It does. It's a more contemplative film in a way. It's more seriously about martial arts. It's a proper martial arts film, if I can say that, whereas The Raid is an action film with martial arts components. In my opinion, that The Raid far surpasses Morantau, but I think Gareth Evans will admit himself that, like you said, it's a bit slow going and it just doesn't match the adrenaline rush that The Raid gives people. But the one thing I love about Gareth is that he doesn't commit to the same thing over and over. The Raid 2 is massively different from The Raid. And then
I don't know why I thought it was going to be like a type of movie where, like, he walks out and it just goes into the next part. It felt like
no. And he was so people have bugged Gareth Evans for years, asking him, where the hell is The Raid 3? When are you gonna make it? Then people stopped asking him that, and people started asking, what was The Raid 3 gonna be about? And then last year he finally let something kind of not slip. He talked about it, and I think it was an Instagram post where he said that the third film was actually gonna be a jungle-based survival thriller, which I found really, really fascinating, because that
sounds cool.
Absolutely, and it would be completely different to The Raid 2 also. Although the one film that seems very, very, or not very, but closest to The Raid in nature seems to be the upcoming film Havoc. It sounds like it's going to be a fairly contained film, with one man getting from point A to kind of the point Z or Z. Then I think that's going to be really interesting. And then he announced obviously today that we're going to get it in the spring. Yeah,
and we're getting a trailer soon. And to bring us back round to Mad Max Fury Road, and it stars Tom Hardy. We'll see. Tom Hardy, very good at jiu-jitsu. So I think we'll see a different Tom Hardy than we've got a chance to see.
Oh my gosh, that movie Warrior. It sounds funny to say, but Kurt Angle. Have you guys seen Warrior, the MMA movie? Yeah. Kurt Angle is the villain at the end. I mean, that was filmed in Pittsburgh, and I had some friends here that were extras in it and stuff. And man, I thought that I went in like, the MMA movies are really, really hit and miss. I mean, they couldn't like
kind of one, right? There's Warrior, and that's pretty.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, there's other ones like Never Back Down and these weird ones. I don't know, but they basically call it an MMA movie if it actually tries to have some jujitsu in the movie, like a lot of jujitsu. I thought John Wick nailed the jujitsu, because it was great, because they pull off the move and then it's kind of realistic. Because in a street fight, if there's multiple people, if you do an arm bar, you're going to have to get up quick, or people are just going to be punting your head while you're down there if there's multiple people, But what I wanted to say before I forget was, just wrapping that up, Warrior I loved. I thought that was great. I was so impressed. But in this, when you talk about the cartoony and stuff, there was one moment that did bug me a little bit, and it's such a small little nitpick, but they did a good job. As they had these crazy scenes, they go down the thing and they would show Iko like kind of crawling and like he's like really beat up, right? So when they fight Mad Dog, the 2-on-1, I mean, it is brutal. You think he's going to die. I mean, they're bashing his brother's head, just bashing it into the ground, right? Then I don't know why, like Mad Dog dies, and then they get in the stairway and they're just kind of like not that beat up. You'd be in the hospital for like 4 weeks, I know it's a movie, but I felt like at that moment they lost they didn't like have the guys as beat up as they should have been right after that scene, like, and that's a small adjustment, but it was like, wow, like those guys are kind of like, they look like they stumbled out of a bar versus like, they're like head. Yeah, I just felt
it's cinema grounded. So in as much as like it's grounded in when compared to like Commando, it's
the most grounded film ever. Commando.
Yeah, and coming from me, who loves Chang-Chi, where the guy gets a spear through it and can like fight for 2 hours,
picks up his sausages and packs them back in again. Exactly. So there's I think if the movie hadn't got you by that point, then I don't think that little change would have made a huge amount of difference. I think his choices were pretty.
Well, I guess it's kind of like like saying he always made them seem really beat up, and like like the guy with his ear, that scene where his ear was blown off and all that, he was just like so hurting, and that made it. But for some reason, after the Mad Dog thing, I thought those guys were going to be on stretchers, and they kind of like had so much fight left in them, like suddenly, like, but. Yeah. What can we say about those two scenes? And I will say, out of everyone being slight builds and stuff, that Jaka though did kind of buck that trend. He seemed like he has that bigger build, and when he goes up against Mad Dog, it makes a nice contrast. And I just have to say, those two fight scenes, I mean, they have jettisoned. I don't know what the word is. I don't know if I want to just say into my top 10, but they're like hovering. Those fight scenes.
It would make sense. Both
of them. I mean. And it's a different animal. Like when we say this intervention, for me, like this opens the door in a way. And it's like, what makes me think? It makes me wish like I could see Shaw Brothers movies back then, but it's kind of like trying to like hear like modern death metal and trying to make the Kinks have that distortion or something, but it's like, I kind of like wonder if some Shaw Brothers movies, I kind of would like to see some of these elements in Shaw Brothers movies. I wish, like, and I guess that's just to say how good a lot of these elements are in this movie. I just, I guess
there is a way, like, if we remove Shaw Brothers from the equation, like as the actual studio entity, there is Chinese movies being made now and Hong Kong movies being made now that do have elements that are an evolution of a world where the Raid has been made.
Absolutely.
We just haven't got there with you yet. So they might not star. I know what you're saying in terms of it would be great to see our Venom Mob core squad doing this type of kind of action, this type of choreography. But I don't think we could have got to the Raid without the legacy that kind of came from Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest and the kind of that era of Hong Kong cinema. But it's really important, I think, that this was a Welshman living in Indonesia that made this movie, because I think it's a perfect storm or a planet alignment. There's a freak coincidence of elements that had to kind of come together to allow this to kind of happen and then birth what's basically like this new little mini sub-industry or sub-genre, if you like, of action cinema that's then been so well received by the world that it's branched off or fractaled off into other areas. And then you can see the effect of the Raid in John Wick and in the later Bourne movies, and you kind of see its impact on the stuntmen, particularly in an American cinema, who've taken an awful lot of what they've seen in the Raid, and in Japanese cinema too. Like it's filtered into the choreography that we see in Baby Assassins and kind of in the work that Kenji Tanagaki's been doing in some of the Rurouni Kenshin movies, and you kind of see its influence manifesting in other places. So I think we all love Shaw Brothers movies. You cut us and we'll bleed Shaw Brothers logo, but I think sadly we can't. Like they wound down production when they did, and it's a real shame. I guess in a way, the closest we got to it in terms of timeline and not in terms of execution was Drunken Monkey, and that was trying to do something fresh for Lau Gar-Long, and get away from the super speed ramping, and he was trying to take it into a different area, and it's almost pushing into the sort of area that the Raid would kind of come in 10 years later, but not quite. And I think it is because I'm convinced it is because Gareth Evans is just not native to that culture. So you're getting somebody making Indonesian cinema who's not indigenously Indonesian, and he's grown up loving American movies as much as he's loved Hong Kong movies. So it's like this perfect storm.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect storm is a great way of calling it. And since you've watched the Raid, Jason, you have a new light behind your eyes. I can see this. I can see this beautiful glow about you. I think you're at least an inch taller, and perhaps even your bonus might be stronger. So it's I think it's a beautiful time for you.
The Raid Viagra. And what is, what's also interesting about it is that I guess I do need to kind of like do the juxtaposition to my old school, because that kind of like highlights the differences, my old school love. And what it is like, how if you take the Sopranos series, and it's like my favorite thing ever. I love the Sopranos, but if you ask people what's your favorite episode, they often say Pine Barrens. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with that, but that's the one where Christopher and Paulie Walnuts get lost in the snow. Mm-hmm. And if you think why that sticks out so much, it's because it's like a quest episode. Like, maybe in Seinfeld, when it goes off the beaten path you're used to, and suddenly two people are on some strange thing, or they're stuck somewhere, Mm-hmm. And that's so many funny things in that movie. And that's why I like Avenging Eagle a lot, because you have like so many Kung Fu movies with Chinese boxer, one-armed boxer, it's two schools, and they wipe out the other school. I mean, you've seen it 100 times, and I love it. It's like my comfort blanket. But when you get to Avenging Eagle and two of them are going somewhere together and they're on this quest, maybe I'm missing a word, but it's just something about the quest, and it's not like it's breaking the mold a bit. It's going like a different direction. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very fresh. This had that in spades, and that's why I was like, man, I hope I can find a Shaw Brothers movie that can also go on a quest like this. Like, you know what I mean?
There's a whole bunch of other movies that are going to scratch that itch in a different way.
Dragon, I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
Me too. I feel like
where'd you take him next? Where'd you take him? I keep thinking your film.
I know it's good for me. Well, I feel it's good for me, like psychologically, because we're watching, like, man, I've been an idiot. Why was I resistant to this? Like, and maybe if I go back to Haya after you guys give me like 10 bangers, of Shadow Strays, Baby, you take me on this mission of what's the other one that everyone's been going crazy on? Well, one of these newer ones.
Maybe Life After Fighting. A lot of people are talking about Life After Fighting.
There's been a straightaway. You guys have been going nuts, but you've also told me you're not allowed yet. We have to
Twilight of the Warriors.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like that'll be like a little further after you get me through some more.
That's probably going to be Christmas 2025. By the time
But what I was saying is, watching that is just like, man, I feel after I watch 10 of these great ones, I feel go to Haya and they'll have Korean ones and modern ones, and I'll be less. I don't like using the word prejudice, but I'm prejudging these things. I'm putting them in a box. I think I have them figured out, and I think I know what I won't like about them. And I'm sure there's some, like, I don't know, Scott Adkins, like knockoff movies, like guys imitating him. They're gonna be crap. You guys will guide me on the modern ones. But it really opened. And I think, like you said, I don't know how you would call it, the fact that Gareth was in Indonesia. And it created. Do you feel like this is the seed that like blossomed a lot of this whole modern trajectory? Well, okay, cool. This is the ground zero then for all that. It sounds like wow.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
And I think as much as like we've got our own little mini perfect storm here, because like we all know each other's sensibilities very well at this point, and we all have a very similar grounding with an awful lot of stuff that we have seen and we know each other's perspectives on. But we had this wonderful opportunity in you. By the fact that you had this stance, right? And that you had this stance in a way that wasn't militant. Like, you weren't saying, nah, fuck, I'm not doing anything after 2000, just hard no, right? You were receptive to the idea of diving into it. So I think you're seeing these movies at the time when you're supposed to see these movies. And I think the joy of it is that we all get to experience, in a way, these again through your eyes for the first time.
You're like a newborn puppy, and for the longest time you haven't latched onto the teat. But now you've latched onto the teat and you're suckling. You're suckling from Dragon Amai's teats.
If I clip anything, it's going to be that.
Man. Oh, by the way, we did mention earlier, I don't want to go on a complete tangent and go down a complete, open a whole different conversation. But we did mention, if you really like the Raid and you wanted a more gunplay based one, Dread. If you haven't seen Dread,
fuck yeah,
Dread is, may I say, identical to the Raid in terms of plot, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's more sci-fi, it's futuristic, and it's more gunplay. But oftentimes people kind of either accuse Dread of ripping off the Raid, or the Raid ripping off the Dread. Apparently, Dread was written before the Raid.
I believe so.
But apparently it was just a coincidence as well, right? That they just happened to be the same plot.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
we got to start taking notes. Like we make a list.
Because Dread was a big one for me when it came around. But weirdly, I didn't see it as being... It was its own different animal to the Raid when I watched it.
Certainly.
And I grew up loving 2000 AD comics. Like Dread, was my first big sort of superhero. I kind of was reading Dread before I was reading Batman or Spider-Man.
Nice.
Because it was easier to kind of get in hold of. And so Rogue Trooper and Dread are two that are like... They're like Conan for Jason in a way for me. They're like two characters that I'm so rooted with in history, but was so disappointed by that Stallone version of Dread. Where
okay. For a second, when you were saying Dread, I was spelling it Dread. Okay, so they're just Judge Dredd.
Judge Dredd.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? I love those comics. I did love those too. I mean, not like as much as you clearly, but there was something really that comic book. They bucked the trend. Like it did not feel like Marvel at all.
It's intrinsically 100% British of a time.
Like anti-Marvel, if anything.
Yeah, and the artwork, like especially at that time where Marvel had everything. They got away from it, but the even panels. I remember you open up like Judge Dredd has this huge like crazy drawing, and then it was all very
chaotic,
kind of like. Yeah, like Image Comics, where they which Todd McFarlane later really did, but where they like use whole page spreads and stuff more often than the standard like DC panels,
Yeah, and I think the version because we'll maybe at some point and people who are listening, let us know if you want us to do Dread at some point. We absolutely will. Cool. We won't go on too much of a tangent, but I think Carl Urban was like perfect casting choice for that part. Never takes off his helmet, which is a kind of cardinal sin amongst 2000 AD fans, because Dredd never takes off his helmet. You never know what Judge Dredd looks like through the entire legacy or history of the comic books. That's the kind of one defining characteristic of that dude. He's in the job 24/7, and why Stallone fucked it up so much.
So
you're saying the cardinal sin is taking it off? You're saying, and they did it right.
Yeah.
Okay,
he doesn't take off ever.
Takes off the entire movie, and I think it's pitch perfect. It's like horribly underrated, and definitely should have got a sequel, because that world's ripe for them diving into more, or TV series or something.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful movie, but it's got its own different energy and different beats and different vibes.
Very much so.
Great
I'm
villain.
open. So what's fun is when you guys mention a good one now, I can't see it, so I wait and we'll do our due process.
We'll get you there. Get you there. Yeah, it may just take some time, but we'll get you there.
Jumping back to the Raid, as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you guys now if you can answer this without hitting like his trajectory in the next one, like no spoilers. Can you explain? I don't quite understand the brothers, like his character arc in this movie. It doesn't quite make sense to me. So he's a villain. He's a bad guy, right?
Yeah,
and it's interesting. Right, from his brother. Like they went down different paths. I get that, and I do think this might explain my confusion, because Gareth was saying he was going to cut out that scene where he stabbed the two guys in the elevator. But I was thinking that is such an important part of like this guy. If you cut that out, then what? Like, where's his dark turn? Well, I'm not saying dark turn. I'm saying like he is in that moment. He killed those two guys. Then he runs into his brother. Then he he's happy to hear that his brother had a child. And then they go their separate ways. They like go back to their like respective lifestyles, if you will. But then, he's faking that he went back to him, and then he gets stabbed, and then he's tortured. But what I don't understand is like what he was going off of the evil path. Was he did he want to usurp that like villain?
No.
Did he?
No. Okay. He saw his brother. He recognized his brother through the CCTV cameras. So and that's what kind of precipitated him stabbing the two guys. That was okay. So he wanted to save his brother, like preemptive strike, but that's a pretty big jump. Okay, so his brother was like, his brother was taking precedence over all of his loyalty to them.
I think so.
Okay,
I think that's the loosest.
So the three of them were going down to kill his brother, pretty much, and the only way he could stop it was killing them too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
they were sent down.
when I first saw it, I thought that he was like a traitor and he wanted to move up the ladder and kill and become the drug kingpin.
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
But it gives that vibe at the end, though, when he walks back. He's gonna. Why would you stay there if you?
Kind
you know?
of. I think he can. I think there's a. He wanted to save his brother, but he's not kind of tomorrow going to join the police academy. Like he's
Right.
still.
No.
He's
he
still
kind of
been
walked him
living
out the door. He's like, "All right, you made it. Thank you. I'm going back."
Yeah.
I also
Kind
think there's a feeling of like he doesn't have a choice. Like
Yeah.
he's part of
Right.
that world, you know, and he doesn't have
Right.
many other options. So at the end, all he can do is turn back and, you know, go back to where he came from. I admit, I don't think the brotherly connection is really tied together perfectly in this film. It could do with fleshing out just a smidgen. But I think overall it's a really good way of adding like some emotion to the film. We can't talk about the art. It would ruin
we
so
can't.
much.
We can say that the brother has no part whatsoever in the Raid 2.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's disappointing because if you, you're lying. I can tell you. You're okay. No. Okay. Well, I don't know if I'm going to fully believe that, but I'm saying when he's walking away smiling, it's like the Joker. How could this guy not be? And he's one of, if they bring back Mad Dog, who they executed, and they're not, I don't know. Well, my jury's out.
You'll have to see. You'll have to see.
The only thing to hang on to, I would say, like, 'cause I don't want to say too much. All I will say, I will remind you of the fact that the Raid, what ended up becoming the Raid 2 was written before, and then he just rejigged slightly and turned it into the Raid 2. So it's not a make a film, write a sequel. It's the Raid does really well, repurpose a film that was already going to get made, and that then becomes
like Missing in Action with Chuck Norris. They did that. Remember, like the second one was released as the first one or something like that.
I
Did you guys know
remember
that?
I didn't remember that. No,
Missing in Action. They released the second one for some reason first. Okay. And then it did so well. I can't remember. It's in like the movie on Canon Films. I think they explained
There's a little bit of that with Armor of God too, where like Armor of God and Operation Condor got released out of sync in the States because Operation Condor came first, and then Armor of God got released after, even though it was the film before. Not that sort of situation. Just more fundamentally, it's a radically different animal. There's a radically different type of movie on every single level.
That is something I didn't predict. I thought this formula is, if you have this team and this formula, they would just try to like remember.
I don't think Gareth Evans can repeat himself. I think he's fundamentally like.
Well, you know that. Like that phrase, remember who brought you to the dance? You know what I mean? Like they often use that. Like I love that band MGMT. Their second album came out. It was like, what in God's name is this? You know, like so I just thought this guy had such a home run, but that is respected. I respect that if he doesn't.
You briefly mentioned like your love of Clockwork Orange earlier on, and a Stanley Kubrick film's always fundamentally a Stanley Kubrick film. There's definitely things in Stanley Kubrick's sensibility that are paralleled throughout his different movies, but they're all very different movies.
True.
Because he was never going to make The Shining 2, or he was never going to make Full Metal Jacket 2 more metal jacketed, or like it's not in his lexicon. And I think
The Shining 2 even shinier.
Yes, I will say Kill Bill and Kill Bill 2 is a good example of being very, very different.
They are different.
Yeah, I mean, they fit together into one. Like,
well, no, they fit together. But like, if you wanted that Kill Bill action, like the Crazy Eights, or everything going, it really like slows down and turns into more of a Tarantino movie. Like dialogue and
that's a trip. I'd say that is. I do think I'm gonna throw my. I don't know throw my cards down, throw my hat in the ring. Don't know what metaphor to use, but I'm going to suggest. I don't think. We already know our next episode is not going to be another intervention. We need a bit of space. We need to get back to more familiar territory for you. So I'm not going to say what we're doing next, but it's not going to be what I'm going to suggest as our next intervention. But I do think our next intervention should maybe be the Raid 2.
I am.
That makes sense.
With that myself.
Yeah.
I think so, because it's in terms of the timeline as well. It's the one that makes the most sense.
No glorious 4K though of that, sadly.
No, but it looks a lot better. Like they're filmed on different cameras, and it doesn't have the same kind of color grade issue. And there's a lot more outside.
I thought you guys were going to say that. So it was originally you only could get the two together. Was that murky version you're talking about?
No, they were sold separately, but like just more the because of the way that the Raid was made, and partly because of its budget and the amount of effects and stuff in it, and the way that the grade was from the original version of the movie that they put out. the Raid 2 doesn't have the same issues, if I can call them issues, where it was filmed on different cameras, and it's not in the same sort of environment situation. It's not the same lighting conditions. It's a completely different animal visually and content-wise as well. Yeah. It's kind of like, in difference of scale, it's El Mariachi to Desperado.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
But
nice comparison.
Much more different thematically, because that's kind of the same character. That's kind of the same movie remade slightly. So maybe not the best version, but that is like Robert Rodriguez when he's getting $7,000 versus Robert Rodriguez when he's getting $7 million.
Okay.
And the difference in those two tones, there's a little bit of that going on with the Raid and the Raid 2. So much bigger cast, much bigger budget.
How about Evil Dead to Evil Dead 2, or more Evil Dead 2 to Army of Darkness jump?
Better.
Yeah.
Evil Dead 2 to Army of Darkness.
That's
okay.
Great. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, guys, you got me good on this one. Like, as we wrap it up, I mean, like I can't even overstate how impressed I was. And there's something powerful. Something has a rewatchability effect. I mean, that's what people. I feel like I honestly could just go watch it again. I don't. I wish I could like put in words what it is. Maybe it's. There's certain movies that have too many twists and turns, or like there's one movie. What's that movie with Jim Carrey where he's like it's a very serious role with it's Spotless Mind.
Eternal Sunshine.
Yes.
Yeah.
I felt that was so powerful, but when I went to watch that again, I had like anxiety. Like that struck me as a movie like you don't want to go through that journey again with him. Like it just felt like torturous a bit. This should feel torturous with the stabs and the hearts and the teeth and everything, you know. This suddenly feels like that comfort feeling I'm getting with the Venoms and stuff. So maybe it's not as foreign as an idea as I thought. Like it's, even though it is very, very different, the camera work, I mean, every element's very different. I feel it still captures the warrior spirit, the, you know, Bushido or whatever.
It's a language that, you know, I don't mean that in terms of Indonesian, but I mean in terms of the action cinema language is a language that you know intrinsically well. You just maybe haven't seen this slight incarnation of it yet, but all of the component elements of it are things that are fit like a glove to you, because it's stuff that you know inside out and back to front. So I think we both secretly knew that this was going to be a bit of a slam dunk.
Oh yeah.
I was sort of joking earlier on, being like, even if you hate it, it's cool, but there's no way that this wasn't going to happen.
The raid is cinematic steak. Right, it's a perfectly cooked steak. You never get bored of it. You can always eat steak. Hopefully, neither of you are vegans. I never asked that.
No,
but it's just
I might cook a steak now. You got me.
It's just a go-to delicious meal every time, and you know it's going to be good, and you know you'll never get tired of it. And it's just perfect. It's a perfect little nugget of action cinema. And it stood the test of time, and it probably will stand the test of time for many years to come.
Yeah.
Awesome, Drag.
I can't wrap it up better than that.
I was thinking Dragon was bringing us home, but I think Shaun just
that was a mic drop. That was a repeatedly bang one guy's head into the wall 5 times.
Nice. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up. Dragon, you want to take us out?
Yes, thank you all of you for listening. If you've made it to the end of this, you are a hero on the level of Iko Uwas. And we will look forward to seeing you on our next episode, which hopefully will be coming very soon in February. We know what it is. You guys don't, but it's a belter of a movie, and we're going to have an absolute blast talking about it. So I've been Fanatical Dragon.
I've been Foo for Thought.
I've been Jason of Martial Arts Theater 3000.
And we've been the Mic'd Avengers. Thank you for joining us.